Guys, let's move on to pressure. Really want to talk about pressure today. I think 9 rounds in is a decent enough sample size to have a look at this. We have spoken about it in the past, Christian, in previous seasons, but yeah, I just feel like the pressure is the one thing in the game, right? If a player isn't having a good game, if your team isn't performing how the coach wants them to, I reckon the one non-negotiable from a coach is just apply bloody pressure. That's the one thing that shouldn't actually ever change as an athlete when you're playing footy. So I just wanted to have a look, Christian, at what types of pressure there are. Again, we have spoken about this in before, but let's rehash it a little bit because we see it in the broadcast as well, the pressure factor. I don't think anyone really knows what that means. It's just sort of a pressure number, and if it's high, it's good, but no one really understands it. What does it mean? How do the numbers get there? And who are the best pressure teams and best pressure players in the competition, in addition to tackling, because there are different forms of pressure.
Yep. So I'll start with, the whole understanding piece of it, and it's probably, it's one of those ones, there is a formula and a whole, every single disposal gets a pressure rating on it, and it's sort of an average of that pressure rating. But just sort of listening to how clubs use it, they're not 100% cross how it gets that number either. So listening to Chad Warner post the 2024 Grand Final in the rooms, and he sort of spoke about, he had just said it, our pressure was at 150 in the first half. I've never seen a number that low. That was ridiculous. So even the players sort of understand, if I try hard, I'm going to get close to 200. If I don't try hard, I'm going to see a number low like 150, and they just use that as a rating. So it's probably a good tool in terms of the players don't have to worry about how do I get my pressure rating up. It's more about just apply yourself and keep going, and clubs sort of know they can sort of feel when their pressure rating would be high or low. But it was almost a little bit of a win for us in the office when we heard so much of, after the 2024 Grand Final, a lot of it was talked about the pressure, the pressure factor, the pressure differential. Both coaches spoke about how important it was for the Grand Final. So you're right, I feel like this year it's become more forefront and front of mind, so a lot more people talking about it.
So, okay, layman question. I see the number and think, okay, well, I've sort of worked out what's decent and what isn't. But what are the various components of the rating? We're talking, corralling a player, tackles, what is the breakup of each factor in that rating?
So 6 levels basically of pressure. So lowest form of pressure is a set kick. So if you've got a set kick, obviously no one can run at you, the man on the mark has to stand still. That will give the defending team a pressure factor of 0.75. So the lowest possible, you can't have a pressure factor of 0 because it's a long-winded answer, but right? There's still 18 other people out there. You still got to be able to hit targets, etc., etc. So 0.75 is the lowest sort of form of pressure. So if you lose a hit out, or if you give away a free kick at the start of the game and it's chip, 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 mark, mark, mark by the opposition, you'll have a pressure rating of 0.75 because you've never been actually able to get involved in the play.
Which, interestingly, you see teams do that when they want to take pressure off a good pressure team. You start possessing the footy a lot more, so you actually do visibly
easiest way to do it. So that's the lowest form of pressure. The next lowest form is no pressure in general play. So the difference between set pressure and no pressure is legally the other team could be putting pressure on, but there's no one close enough or around to do it. So a lot of those would be probably the most common example of that. As soon as you leave the goal square from a kick in, most of the time you're going to be under one pressure. You're in general play, people could tackle you, but you've got a good 10, 15 metres of space around you.
Switching the footy out of defence.
Playing on, when you see the guys sort of, if they take a mark in the back 50 and kick it, they'll be under set pressure. But as soon as they take off and the umpire calls play on, that's when we sort of give a pressure factor of 1. So that's the second lowest. And then we sort of got 4 sort of levels of pressure where you're actively doing something. So corralling, that's just taking the space away from the player. So you're not getting any closer to the player. So, and this is at the point of disposal. So a player's handballing the ball and you might be standing sort of 5-10 metres away, hands up, trying to sort of smother and take away the space. That's sort of your third lowest level of pressure. You're around and you're taking away the space, but you're not actively hurrying up the disposal player, if you like. The next level of pressure is chasing. So that's coming from behind and chasing someone from behind. So you're making them have to dispose of the ball quicker, but you're not making it harder to sort of, there's still space in front of them to make the kick. So that's why it's sort of the 4th lowest level of pressure is chasing, and the next one is closing. So closing is basically the same thing, but from the front. You're coming from the front, you're making it harder to handball, kick, you're making the guy have to kick it under you or over you, etc., etc. Chasing from behind or closing from the front are 2 different levels of pressure.
Or assuming that there can be closing and chasing at the same time as well.
No, so we'll only go with the highest level of pressure. So it's another one that if someone is chasing you but someone else ends up closing in on you, the closing player will get the pressure act on that kick.
Yeah, right.
Can I just ask, sorry, at that point, just from a practical point, when you guys are doing this, is one person Is that their sole responsibility?
Yep. So one pressure caller with one person capturing. So the kicks are captured by main capture. So we'll call all the kicks that are happening through a game. The pressure software will take and get every single kick and handball that we've called. So it's also another level of QA. So if there's no kick there where they expect to be one, they'll tell us and we'll add one in. Or if it's the wrong player, they'll be the first people to see it.
Yeah.
So all the kicks and handballs come through, and they basically, at the point of the kick or the handball, they look at, all right, who was putting what type of pressure was on the kick and who was it. But on top of that, they do what foot the guy's kicking with, what the intent of the kick is. So if you're kicking to a leading target or a contest or an open player. So yeah, these pressure players are pressure callers. Not only do they get the pressure rating from the work that they're doing, but they get their left foot, right foot makeup. They do the kick rating, which we've spoken about, which looks at how well you hit a target under certain pressure.
Yeah.
They're sort of doing one-on-one contests. So there's a whole lot of extra stuff they're tagging, not just pressure. But it's basically, they're sitting there and you listen to them talking, because pressure sort of, we got it in number code. So it's either 0, 1, 2, 3 or physical or whatever. And it's sort of listening to them call, it's the most nonsensical football call you'll ever hear. You hear someone sort of go, Cameron 2, left, short, open, Hipwood 1, covered, long. And it's sort of like, well, it doesn't make sense, but it matches up
it's
to
a lot
what
to
they've
track,
meant to
though. It's
track
a
all
lot
the
to
things.
track.
So we sit in the press box with those guys. Like, is that everyone, or are there other?
So there's 6 at venue now, including one guy down on the bench sort of helping with IT connectivity and things like that. No, actually sort of hardware assistance. Then we got our interchange captures up in the press box. So 5 at the ground and another 6 at the ground, another 6 in the office. So 2 of those are dedicated to pressure capture and call, what we call. So sort of sitting there tagging it all off vision, but it all comes from the main call. So as I said, if there's if no kick, we don't call a kick, we just call it a smother, then they won't get a kick to put pressure on, sort of thing. So it all lines up, and they're our point of QA where they'll come back and say, I reckon you need to add in a kick for this player, or you're missing a handball for this player, etc., etc. So, sitting there live and just tagging basically every disposal.
So a pressure rating, so a team having 200, factor of 200, let's just say, and then it goes down to 170 in a quarter. Does it reset to 0 at?
No, so it's always just your average on your disposal. So, so it's always just going to be, you might start off the game with really low pressure because the team might come out and take 3 or 4 marks.
Yeah.
But as soon as the ball hits the ground, you sort of get 2 or 3 tackles on. A tackle is worth 375 pressure points, if you like. So a pressure gauge would go anywhere from 0.75 points to 375 points.
Yeah.
So clubs sort of know if we get anywhere around the 200 to 220 mark,
which is your closing.
Which is up in your closing and closing is I think about 225 points. So
So the final pressure rating for a whole game is that. This might be dumb. Sorry. Is that like
it's
the
basically
average of the 4 quarters?
Average of every disposal.
Pressure applied to every disposal.
All right. Next question: how closely do the rankings on pressure correlate to the ladder?
Yeah. So that's the next one we talk about. So that's
just before we do that.
Sorry.
Can I get you to guess who you think the best pressure player in the competition is? I want to throw you under the bus here because I know you're not looking at Christian's data here. These aren't. I had a player in mind that hasn't appeared, and he'll get to it. But I just want to know if you have
best pressure player.
Anyone in the top of your head?
I would have thought someone like, Jordan of Sydney or a tagger or someone like that.
Yeah, for inside midfield or someone.
Yeah.
Best pressure players.
Yeah. I'll just touch on the tagger one. So James Jordan's not up there. When we first did pressure, Ryan Crowley was the number 1 tagger in the competition, and we started doing pressure about 2010, 2011.
So you had
he was always
scratching blokes.
No, he was always below average for pressure, which sort of didn't make sense. But it's because he's just looking at one player. So if his one player's not getting the ball, he's not putting pressure on. Whereas a lot of these guys, so number 1 pressure player is Tom Atkins, number 1 tackler in the competition. So not too much surprise there. But he's also a centre bounce midfielder who just gets in amongst it. He's not sort of playing at half back on one certain player. You got Tom Atkins, most pressure acts this year at 30 per game. Jack Graham second at 27.6 per game. Libba is third with 26 per game. Matt Rowell, 25.5 per game, and Rowbottom fifth with 25.4 per game.
And that's based on?
That's just pressure rack. So this is, Tom Atkins, there's 30 disposals.
Who would you have guessed?
The 2 that I wrote down were Dylan Moore and Matt Rowell.
Dylan Moore?
Yeah,
so like a small forward?
Small forward, yeah. that type of player.
I just would have thought a midfielder because they're probably
Around the
involved
footy
in the
bit more.
game a bit more.
It makes sense.
Yeah, so that's what, I mean, so that's looking at total pressure rate. So as I said, 30 for Tom Atkins, it means 30 of the opposition's disposals have had Tom Atkins apply pressure on it.
Can I something else I noticed just quickly, Jack Graham had 42 pressure racks on the weekend, which seemed excessively high, but I don't know if I just don't look at that stats column often enough. And it just looks high because I don't look at it. Is 42 pressure racks in a single game of footy high?
It was the highest in any game this year. But I think we've seen, 49 is the highest. Kieran Jack in 2013. A couple of 48s and 47. So to get in the 40s is high. No one's broken the 50 pressure point mark.
This is the definitive coach's stat, isn't it? Because Jack Graham at Richmond, a lot of people, including me, probably didn't appreciate the value he bought, but there it is.
It's his bread and butter. Yeah.
And you sort of talk about like disposals being, you know what 30 disposals and 20 disposals is a good game. Same as Tom Atkins, that's how you can sort of look at it, or the Jack Graham one that you mentioned. 42 times, he wasn't winning the ball, but 42 of the disposals, he was the closest pressure player. So you sort of think it is a big number to have. If you think of someone getting the ball 42 times, well, he hasn't got the ball 42 times, but he's been the closest player putting pressure on. So it's a pretty big game by him. But yeah, that was looking at pressure racks. As I said, every pressure rack equates to a pressure point. So if you're just corralling, if Tom Atkins was just corralling the whole game, he might have the most pressure racks, but he wouldn't be the top pressure player because he's not actually putting the most valuable pressure on. So you can look at pressure points per game, which is taking into account, as I said, you get 3.75 points for a physical pressure rack, 2.25 for closing, etc., etc. Tom Gatkin still comes up number one, so he's getting 77.6 pressure points per game.
So, sorry, could I just ask you about the corralling?
Yep.
Who's doing that mostly? Is it backman standing off as the ball's coming in 50, or is it?
No, it's just that anyone could do it. So forwards, midfielders, defenders, probably just in that time of play, it's probably more likely to happen closer to the boundary. The guy can't go backwards, so there's no point rushing at him.
Yeah.
You're sort of just holding holding space. So it's the guys that you see. It might even be a Cozzy Pickett or someone that is going to step around you. Like, well, I'm not going to step around you. I'm just going to make you stand in front of me.
It's a hard one to judge, though, isn't it? Like, you're not going to have a discussion, he's the best corraller in the...
Yeah, exactly.
Who is the best corraller?
But the coaches would love him, right?
Yeah.
And it's like Tom Atkins coming on the top of the charts of the pressure racks. Like, he's the perfect player to help balance out Max Holmes and Bailey Smith in that midfield, isn't it?
Well, it's like... I was thinking from a cruel point of view, it's like the guy who's no good, but you have that thing where you go, well, he occupies a tall defender. Well, I could occupy a tall defender. I'd just stand there.
Atkins and Jack Graham, top two for pressure racks and pressure points, but sort of James Rowbottom's one that comes up high. So he's fifth for pressure racks, but third for pressure points. So basically that's showing that he's a lot more tackles and actually hard pressure racks that he's applying. That's just looking at the raw number of who's had the most and who's applied the most. But what you want to do is you want to be able to turn the ball over from your pressure. What's the point of putting pressure on if a guy is just going to end up, you might be closing a guy who kicks a goal. Your pressure rack's not going to matter
almost
in the
like
end.
effective pressure.
Yeah. So these are looking at the guys that have actually created turnovers from their pressure racks. And again, James Rowbottom comes up on top. So no longer do we have Tom Atkins. He drops down to fifth. So Rowbottom, 39 times the opposition has turned the ball over because of his pressure, which is the most in the competition. Hugh McCluggage is second. So he's another big one that's not high for pressure racks, but 38 turnovers caused from his pressure racks. Neil Bullen, perennial probably top 10 in this stat. He's got 36 this year. So
okay, so does that mean they're better at applying pressure, or does it just mean they're applying pressure in an area of the ground where it's more likely to be turned over?
Probably half and half. Some of this can come down to a little bit of luck, and in terms of... I'll go back one step. So you can only get a turnover from pressure if you're actually chasing, closing, or physical. So the guys that we'll talk about corralling, if you're corralling someone, they turn it over, you don't get a turnover force because it's sort of like, well, it's not the three highest sort of things of pressure. So we do have a sort of, if you turn the ball over from an offensive point of view, if you turn the ball over while you're getting corralled or from a set kick, it's an unforced turnover. Yeah. If you turn the ball over from a chasing, closing, or physical pressure act, then it's a forced turnover. So we can also break it down from the attacking point of view. But yeah, it's sort of 39 of Rowbottom's turnovers. A lot of those will be because he is a good tackler. He's probably creating a hole in the ball and things like that. 38 for McCluggage, probably similar. But again, some of those times you could just be lucky. You could be closing and a guy just happens to miss his target by 10 metres and cause a turnover. So top three, Rowbottom, McCluggage, Neil Bullen. Going one step further, you can look at, as I said, Tom Atkins puts a lot of pressure acts on per game, but he's only 5th for turnovers per pressure act. So we can also go in to look at who actually creates the most turnovers per pressure act. So 24% of the time, Darcy Byrne-Jones puts pressure on the opposition, they turn the ball over. That's the number one in the comp. So what he does as a small forward for Port Adelaide, that's one in, a quarter of the time that he's actually chasing or closing or physically getting, usually these days, a halfback flanker. It's creating a turnover somewhere in the midfield zone for Port Adelaide. So he's probably what you call a valuable pressure player.
Yep.
Zach Merritt's another one. Doesn't appear in the top 5 for most pressure acts, but 22% of his pressure acts have actually caused a turnover from the opposition. So second, and then you got 3 guys, Bowie from Melbourne, Xavier Dersma from Essendon, and Jamie Cripps from West Coast are all at 21% of their pressure acts actually turn the ball over.
Gee, that's interesting about Merritt, because I reckon maybe not so much in the last couple of years, but there was a view that he wasn't that great a defensive midfielder, don't you think?
Yeah. So again, it doesn't mean he's highly rated for actually applying pressure, but when he does, if he puts pressure on, it's going to be quality pressure. Take it one step further again, so we can keep going down the rabbit hole. Looking at those, so you can create a turnover from your pressure, but how often does your team actually score from that turnover?
So effective.
So pressure. You've pressured the team to turn it over, but you've also allowed your team to go back and score the other way. So this year, Isaac Rankin's actually number 1 in the competition. So 56 points the Crows have kicked based on turnovers coming from his pressure acts. That's 13 more points than anyone in the comp. So it's not a lot. 56 points doesn't seem like a lot.
Usually you would assume would be forward half as well.
That's because he spends time
usually guys that play forward half are going to come up in this. James Peatling second or equal second with Curtis at North Melbourne. So they've both generated 43 points.
Yeah.
And then third or fourth, if you because of the 2 tied in second, is Alex Neil-Bullen at 39 points from pressure act. So 3 of the top 4 are all Adelaide this year. So Rankin, Peatling, and Neil-Bullen are sort of those guys that can put the pressure on the opposition. Adelaide sort of turn the ball over and be able to kick a score from it. So Maurice Rioli's always been very high on this stat for Richmond as well for the last few years. He was probably, I think there was one year he's about 200th for actual pressure acts,
Did you
but
just
number
point
1.
at me because you know I love him?
No, well,
No, I do.
I think we were just talking about small forwards sort of getting looked after in this stat, but that's where the valuable pressure comes in. If you can get a small forward that can actually run down somebody, turn the ball over, you most likely is going to score a goal.
Very, very quickly, because we need to move on to the next part of the pod. Best pressure teams, and does it correlate, as you said before, with the best teams in the comp?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways to look at best pressure teams. They usually do correlate with the better teams in the comp. So the best pressure teams this year, Hawthorn's number 1 for pressure factor at 186. So speaking about 200's what you want to reach in a game.
So that's an average of chasing?
So somewhere between... so chasing is about 1.9, I think. So just under that.
Yeah.
GWS are the next highest at 184, and again Carlton and Brisbane are 183 each. So the comp average is 179.
Yeah.
So they're all above the average. So they're the best teams that are applying pressure. But what you've got to look at as well is if you're applying a lot of pressure, usually that means you're in a high pressure game. You'll receive a lot of pressure. So as a coach, you don't want to just go out there and say, let's just win the pressure factor, because it's like, what are we doing when we get the ball? We need to do something with the ball. So what you want to do, and what Collingwood probably won a premiership with 2 years ago, is pressure differential. Able to put lots of pressure on the opposition, but when we win the ball, we win it and take it away from pressure into space. The number 1 team this year for doing that is Brisbane.
Yeah.
So they're actually plus 12 points. Their pressure that they apply is 12 points better than what they receive from the opposition. GWS second and Hawthorn third. So Essendon's a team I wanted to touch on here. Basically, in the question being, is Essendon a bad pressure team? If you go by the pressure rating, they've got the 3rd worst pressure. So they apply a pressure of 174. So straight top line stuff, you're like, Essendon not a great pressure team. But they receive the 2nd fewest pressure of any team.
Yeah.
So when you look at their differential, they go to 6th best in the competition.
Is that because of the amount of uncontested
so they play a low pressure game,
Yeah.
but across the game, they're receiving less pressure than what they're applying. Which has to be a good thing. So it's, again, one of those ones of, when you're looking at the best pressure teams, you would not necessarily just go to the pressure rating stat, because you have to get context. Okay, if we're putting a lot on, but we're just receiving as much, it's not getting us any bonus. But like, as I said, with Brisbane, if they can hit you hard around the source of the pressure, but when they win the ball, get a lot more uncontested possessions, that's what you should
So the
see
differential is more important than the raw
in terms of, I think that shows you more, it correlates more with winning.
Who's that available to?
I think all clubs, most of the media would get it. So Fox and Seven, it's just, a lot of the times, a lot of the TV or even the radio, it's probably their choice that they probably think that
It's a bit too
yeah,
something.
they might struggle to get it out. So it's available a lot there. As I said, last year it slowly came into, or probably the last 2 years, especially with the Fox pressure rating being on TV, it's come into it. But we really found after the grand final last year, I think everyone started to understand how much teams value it and how much you sort of can take away from analysing the pressure numbers. So, as I said, it's not just the pressure rating that you see on TV. There's a lot more that makes up to how you sort of look into it.
Very good. No, might have to revisit this as the season goes on. Now you've learnt what the numbers mean, right?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting discussion.